Good morning, Coldwell Banker George Realty. It's lovely to see you all on this cooler Friday morning. For those of you who have been keeping up and coming in on the Thursday meetings, this is going to be just a brief review of some of the high points of the commission forms. So we won't address all of them. After this session, we'll be going through contract by contract as was requested in our meeting yesterday. So we'll go over each contract, but for today, we're just going to do a quick review, go over some of the forms so that when you're out there working, taking listings, that you understand them. So I'm going to begin my share screen and we're going to get going. Okay, so the first form I have up is the residential listing agreement. So again, this is a review period. It's not something new to those who have been coming every time, but we're just going to hit the high points and take questions. Peter Cam is in the room, and I know that you guys requested we shout out our questions and answers because you can't hear us in the room, so we'll make sure to shout it out or come up. So this is the residential listing agreement. We're going to hit the high points. We'll take questions. So it populates with the agency. And this is a review. So here's your new residential listing agreement. The period, the beginning and end date goes here. It tells you it can't exceed 24 months. Unless it's and this is for 1 to 4 units, unless the seller is a corporation, LLC, or partnership. It's really this listing price. Make sure you don't miss it. It's very thin. The listing price goes here and it'll populate like that. Okay. So it's going to type it out for you as well. If this property is specific, make sure you're checking the box. And right here, it's telling the seller that the commissions are not fixed by law. They are set by each broker individually and are negotiable. So make sure you utilize this listing agreement and any other of the CAR agreements in the manner they are intended and with the spirit of, you know, the law and how the CAR attorneys wrote it. So if you see this, it says only seller's side of the transaction for this compensation box. Okay, so you put your percent here for your side only. Normally, we don't do a flat fee dollar amount, so I'm not checking that box. You come down to C2, and this is, again, a big review for those of you who have been in every class. If you want to check this box, what this means is if a buyer tells you, I don't want you or any other agent, I am not represented by any agent representing me, I'm going to represent myself. So if that occurs on your listing, that does take a little extra work from the listing agent. It is not dual agency. It's not there for you to take it into a pot to share with anybody else. This is simply here if you're going to work with an unrepresented buyer. By work, I mean you do not create agency. I'll show you the form. And you will open the doors for inspections. Of course, you're going to send them the seller's, you know, disclosures and things like that. But you negotiate this with the seller up front. What percentage do you want to put in here or flat fee for working with an unrepresented buyer? It says right here, it does not apply to dual agency. This isn't to make a bigger pot to share with another agent. This is specifically for an unrepresented buyer. If you go dual, it's the same process that we've been saying. You, on your residential purchase agreement, you would check G3, SPBB would populate, but also remember, prior to working with a buyer, even listing agents, you need a BRBC. What's the acronym? BRBC. Yeah, BRBC. You have to kick off your relationship with any buyer with that form, and I'll show it to you. Okay, so this is for unrepresented. Here, continuation of right to compensate the broker for the houses that you were broker involved in. You may want to put some calendar days in here. If they go around and buy it after this agreement expires, you want to protect yourself. There is a form that you would need to submit to that buyer listing the properties where you had involvement, broker involvement. It's an NBIP and it outlines it in 4D2. So just remember, a week before this agreement expires, if your buyers have not bought or bought all the properties they want, make sure you're protecting yourself by having, you have to start this at the beginning, continuation days in your listing agreement to protect yourself if somebody comes back around and buys that you've shown the property, okay? Seller obligation to pay previous brokers, a very important box. You need to ask the seller if they have any obligations to another broker. So simple question. Most of the time, if they're having you there, they probably won't, but it's a good question to ask. If they do, then you need to list the broker and what property and things of that nature. Items included, liened. This should look pretty familiar. This is easy to miss right here, E1. So E1, you want to put in the primary MLS that you're with. So make sure you click that because that's really easy to miss where the property will be marketed with which MLS. Okay, so make sure that's in there. And that's it. I think if you have the investigation reports, like I said, I'm not going to go line by line, but if you're selling a condo or a townhome or a PUD that does have homeowners association docs, you may want to check this and explain to the seller that it's best to order these up front and get that done. Okay. And the NHD you can order, and if the deal doesn't close, it doesn't cost the seller anyway. Okay. So I'm going to stop there because this is a review and open forum. Are there any questions? Peter is in the room on this listing agreement. Speak loud in the room so they can hear you.
Okay, on this listing agreement, you have a section said probate. We don't need to use a probate form or just the same form?
No, you can check that and it's gonna, it's attaching a form. It's populating once you check that box.
So you have to attach another form?
No, it'll populate for you. So he wants to know if the form on this box populates. It does. Okay. Any other questions? This is a quick review and it's open forum. So if you want to ask questions, go ahead.
On C2 or C?
Okay, the question is on C2 4C.
What is the norm for to put for unrepresented buyers?
I don't know that we've established a norm.
It's
new.
negotiable.
Yeah.
Anything from 1% to 2%, 3%. Yeah, it's up to the seller.
Camilla was asking if there is a norm for the unrepresented buyer for the company. It's purely negotiable with your seller. Okay, so I'm going to go back. Okay, so we're going to go over, like I said, this is a big review. So buyer and the BRBC, I'm going to click that up. We're going to quickly review it. Take any questions. Oops. Need to do that. So this form populates with an agency. And remember, there's a couple of things to really remember on this form. This is non-exclusive unless you check the box to make it exclusive and have them initial a paragraph. I believe it's 15. So this is what is required, buyer representation and broker compensation agreement before you go and show properties to any buyer. Even if you're showing your own listing, please have an agreement in place with that buyer So when you write an offer, if they decide to write an offer with you, you have this document in your file. So here's the representation period. Remember, this one cannot exceed 3 months. It says it right here. Unless the buyer is a corporation, LLC, or partnership. The type of representation, this is a very important line item. I would suggest that we check the exclusive. It is a higher protection for you as the agent. If they went to an open house, failed to mention they were working with you and made an offer through another agent, you're still protected. But you also have to have them initial paragraph 15 when you check this exclusive box. So we'll get down there, okay? Property type, it defaults to single family, including condos, manufactured homes, residential. Now, if you are showing more property types to this particular buyer, make sure you're checking whatever applies, or you're writing in if it's some kind of unique property. Location, we do recommend that you use the county location. Don't box yourself in with cities. I would use LA County, Orange County, whatever counties you're going to be showing in. It covers more ground than just cities. I don't know what you would put in the additional description. Additional buyer preferences. This is not mandatory, but if you want to click this box and interview them with a form on what kind of property, beds, baths, square footage, things of that nature, 2-story, single story, you can do that. It's not required. Now, this is where you're going to ask them, are you on contract with another agent? I would ask them before I even got this far down the form, but this is a good reminder. So you need to make sure and ask them if they're on another contract. If they are, then some properties may be excluded from your agreement. Okay. So this is again saying that the commission is not fixed by law. Amount of compensation, you put that here. We normally don't have a flat fee, so the percent would go here. And remember, whatever percent you put there, you cannot ask for more on your offer, because this BRBC will not be submitted with the offer. The SPBB will, but the seller can ask you to confirm that you have a BRBC with the percent you're asking for, should they elect to pay the percentage. So make sure that whatever you want to submit on your offers is represented here. Don't go higher. You have to stay within. You cannot get more compensation from the seller than your contract amount. So look at it that way, than your contract amount. On the offer, you can't ask for more. Now, I know if somebody offers a bonus, that's a different story, like a builder, right? So that would all be transparent and documented. But out the gate, you need to match, okay? Because I know last time somebody was asking about, what about the places that give you a bonus? That would be documented. That is the developer, the seller. They would have documentation pertaining to that.
If the seller offer for commission 2% to the buyer agent, and can we ask the buyer pay us 2% more on it?
Sure, if the BRBC stipulates for 4%. Okay, if it's only 3%.
Even we get the commission, from the seller, we
Yeah,
can ask the buyer, pay
So
us
initially,
2%.
you ask how many percent from the buyer. So if the buyer said 3%, if you get 2% from the seller, you can only come back and ask 1%
Yeah.
from the buyer. You cannot ask more than that.
No more than 4.
So the
No,
question.
no more than 3, because yeah, because the buyer promised to only pay you 3%. So you, doesn't matter where other sources,
Yeah.
the money comes from, it can only be 3% maximum.
No more 3%.
So the question in the room, I know you guys asked me to make sure you could hear them, is the amount of compensation. What if the seller said, I'll pay you 2%, and then you go around to collect another 2% from the buyer? Sure, Peter said, if this said 4% in it. If it only says 2% and the seller's already taking care of the 2%, you can't circle back to the buyer and collect another 2%. It is the maximum amount of your agreement. Okay,
So would it be better to ask for on a listing commission, ask for 6%?
That was my next question.
No.
That
Oh.
was my next question.
That, when you have a listing agreement, that's for the listing agent only, not for the
Yeah, but
buyer's agent.
Negotiable.
You're right, you keep saying it's negotiable, Peter.
Yeah, negotiate, yeah, you can ask the seller to pay you 4% or 6%.
Right, that
But
was.
that 6% goes to you, not to the
Right.
vice broker.
Right, but how, Mike, I think he's saying is, just cause the seller said,
talk loud.
just cause we said 6%. Okay. You could cancel the contract and say, okay, Carlos, I'll pay you 3%, cause now I'm obligated in the negotiation process. When you bring a buyer, says, you know what, this guy wants 3, let's cancel the 6%, and you pay 3 and you pay the other agent 3. That's what I'm saying, just cause he says 6, huh?
Yeah, but it will be.
Go renegotiate, I guess is the
Yeah,
word,
but-
renegotiate.
Why we want to negotiate? We negotiate again, you know. in the beginning,
Because
just
it's a
have that-
different ballgame now.
Oh,
And we wanna do it legally, of course. We don't wanna circumvent anybody. But I was thinking exactly the same thing. I'm gonna tell the seller, hey, it's a new game, 6%.
Well,
No,
is
what-
that 6% your standard operating for a listing agent? You need
Yeah.
to, that's, I
Yeah,
think
yes.
because
Reasonable.
I wanna.
It-
close
yeah,
in.
you have to be in line with the market, you know? So if, like Peter said in another training, if a seller says, I like you so much, I'll give you 10%, good for you. But this listing agreement was intended only for the listing side. If something comes up, and I think Peter would agree, and the listing agent, you know, they think this is a great offer, something's going on, and the seller's not budging, you know, maybe they talk at that point, but don't
Exactly.
use the listing agreement as a vehicle to cover
No,
another
we wanna
agent.
do it- We wanna do it the right way.
Yeah, sure, you can have any other arrangement with the seller, okay? It is, what is stipulated in the RPA is only one way that you negotiate with the
Right,
seller. You
yeah.
cannot have other means or other ways to
No.
do that, but if you wanna do that, then you want to make sure that the language is right.
Right, that's what we're
Okay,
asking.
and then you have to you ask your own attorney to draft the language for you so that you won't be in trouble later.
So Peter said if you put 6%, we're just leaving an example on that listing agreement, but your intention was really to cover another agent, that is not what the purpose is or the spirit of, you know, what CAR has done. So if you decide to do that, you need to have an attorney review it and write the proper language to cover not only you, but the company.
Yeah.
So his advice is listing side only.
Yeah, you have to have addendum to the RPA.
Right.
Make sure that it's different from the normal RPA. That's all. That's what they want you to do. Anything is negotiable again.
What like we say when I get to send a buyer and the maximum commission I can collect for both seller and buyer, just only 3%, no more than 3%.
If it says 3% in the BRBC, but if it says 5% in our BRBC, then you can collect up to 5%, and no more. So it all depends on how much you put in the BRBC in the beginning.
So remember, we were talking about unrepresented buyer or tenant, non-agency. Make sure that if that is the case for you, that this form is filled out. You're working on behalf of the seller, not the buyer. So we need documentation. We need the documentation. So this form was created by CAR to protect us to not be in an agency if the buyer is, you know, not hiring us to, you know, be their agent. So we want to make sure that we document that we are not in agency with the buyer. We are working on behalf of the seller. So these forms are important if you run across something like that. You know, I'm hoping that 95% of buyers will be represented, but you know, we'll see how this is gonna go. I believe they will be, but that's just my opinion. So we have to see how it goes out there. Same thing with the seller. If you're chasing a property where the seller says, you know, I don't want an agent, there's also a seller non-representation, non-agency. So if you're in those situations, make sure that you are having the proper form. And this is only if they don't want to utilize an agent. They're not with another agent and they don't want to be on contract with you. You protect the company and yourself by using these forms. It's a simple form to fill out, okay? So let me go back. In Zoom, are there any questions? This is more a review. It's open to your questions. Okay. 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 Good morning. Okay. So, those are the points that we're going to go across. I'm going to pull up the RPA just so we all remember where to check that box for the SPVB. So here we go. This is how you get paid. So we need to make sure we don't forget to check the box and not attach the form. Because once you check G3, so this populates, this is your RPA. This is going to populate with your agency and some other disclosure right here. Make sure you understand where that is. I'm going to check this box. Seller agrees to pay the obligation of the buyer to compensate the buyer's broker under separate CAR form SPVB. So by checking this box when you're writing the offer, it will populate that form. So I say it and then it doesn't populate it, but it should. Hang on, let me find it.
We trust you, Michelle, it will.
Yeah, it should populate. Huh. Okay, let me pull it up another way. It does populate. I just don't know why, because we're on Zoom. It's doing that, of course. So the SPVB, you check G3, it must be attached to your offers. Now, if you're using CAR agreements, you will find check boxes for commission to be attached as well. For instance, if you're using the commercial agreement CAR forms, you're going to need to do all of this too. So if you are a commercial agent, as we were talking yesterday, it might be good for you to get a suite of the AIR forms on your CAR. It flows right in on this dashboard, and you can order those for $239, I believe, a year, and it's going to allow you to use the CAR forms all year long for one price. So if you are an agent that is doing mostly commercial or a mixture thereof, we recommend the AIR forms. So this is the SPVB that will populate with your offer once you check the appropriate box. You'll fill out the top, or a lot of this may populate, okay? This should all look familiar to us. We're going to have the buyer, the seller's name, buyer's broker, seller's broker, the date of the purchase agreement, the address. Okay, so here's your important box here, 1A. You're going to put the percent here, the same percent that you put on your BRBC, okay? It's here. Or if you put a flat amount, they have a place to put your dollar amount. And it's a very simple form. The buyer signs it, you submit it with your offer. At that point, the seller has 3 routes to go. They accept it because your offer is what they're looking for, terms, conditions. They can counter it for a different commission price. Or they can say no. However, that would probably be more on properties where there's 10, 15 offers. So we always recommend you swing the bat and, you know, put your offer in and see if the seller will cover the commission.
And they're gonna counter it on the counter offer, correct?
Yes, so the counter offer is the vehicle to counter the SPBB. And you can counter it by voiding the old one and attaching a new one and checking the box at the bottom of the counter that SPBB dated. Make sure you reference the date because that's going to show you brought a new one in. Right? So, okay. Go ahead, Jeff, with your question. Okay, I guess he can't hear me. Okay, so if there's any questions, make sure you're asking. This is more of a review and open forum. Peter is sitting here, so I want to open it up to any of your questions. Anybody out there have a question? I forgot to point one box out on the BRBC, so I'm going to go back real quick because I think it's really important. We've talked about it a lot, but if your buyer, I'm looking at G2, tells you that they don't have the financial wherewithal to also pay commission to you, as Peter said, it is your fiduciary to check that box. If they tell you that, you need to check the box. So then, you know, if they tell you, I don't have the money to pay you, you can say, well, let's handle it a different way. You check the box and explain to them, you're going to see if the seller will cover it. You're going to ask the seller to cover the commission. Okay.
Should that be the buyer agent responsibility or to ask you to request the money? Should it be the buyer agent?
Yeah, this is a buyer's agreement, buyer representation agreement between the buyer's agent and the buyer.
Yeah, but on the listing form. you
The
have to-
listing, okay, so we'll go back to the listing. That's completely different.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay, here's the residential listing agreement.
Sure, I have a question for that one before.
Okay, go ahead, Paxton, and then we're gonna go over to Herman. So here is the listing agreement, right? The compensation to the seller's broker is right here. When you are representing any buyer, you will start with the BRBC. Even if you're the listing agent on your own property, you're showing a buyer that property, have a BRBC. Okay? So this is different. Let me see, I think a question, and then I'm going to get to you, Herman. Hold on. Okay. Oh, okay. So Nick is asking if a buyer can add commission on top of their loans now. I think no. Peter said no. I think they're looking at it, but it's not.
They're working on it, but right now it's still not feasible because not permissible because there's a lot of federal laws and state laws that governing the mortgage loans versus the personal loans.
Oh,
So
okay.
the bank has to have you know, some reform from the Congress in order to do that.
The buyer will then get a profit.
Yeah.
Jeffrey, any buyer you're taking around, you should have a BRBC on. Because you can document.
All the property showing representation.
Yeah. So business opportunity, if that's what you're working on, you should have a BRBC. Go ahead, Herman.
Okay, so the back to BRBC,
Which one?
BRBC.
Okay.
So the idea of BRBC is the buyer has to set commission rate, the maximum amount that they can receive from the buyer, right?
Right.
And then the seller can only pay max to the whatever's written there, right? Okay, now if you go down, if you set that on the bottom one, where it says that the buyer does not have sufficient funds, so that means it's 0% commission, right? So how can the buyer agent ask the SPPC to the seller if this one is already set none?
No, you're still gonna put the percentage in here. You must put something in. But what they're telling you is, I understand, you want that commission, but I don't have the money to pay you. So if you look down and he's asking, does this make sense here when the buyer's already told you they don't have money? So if you look down in 9B of this BRBC, if I'm shouting at you, I'm hoping you hear, buyer obligations, financial and personal information. When you specify, that they can't, oh, hang on. Am I on the wrong paragraph? Sorry, excuse me. Let me go back up, my eyeballs. Oh, I'm sorry, 9B. Yeah, that was the right one. So read 9B. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna go ahead and ask the seller and explain that to them, that you'll do your best to have the seller pay.
So it's okay to check both. Ask for the compensation, I can ask like 10% on the compensation, but if check the buyer cannot pay this. So I will ask the seller to pay 10%.
But you could. but
You
the-
can ask.
Yeah, you can
So
ask.
it's okay to check both like that. Because
Yeah.
My understanding is we only limited by the compensation that is written on T3. But at the same time, the buyer does not pay. So basically the buyer just authorizing us to ask for the seller.
Right. You're
That's okay.
limited by the norms of the environment we
Just
work
kind of
in.
like
Yeah,
conservative, But if it's okay, then it's fine.
yeah, yeah. Cause everything's negotiable. Yeah,
At the time that you're taking a listing, you can tell the seller all this consideration.
so when you're taking a listing, what we recommend is, because the listing agreement only covers you, like Peter said, we don't want to shock a seller. You want to tell them that most of the offers are gonna come in with a request for the buyer broker's commission. So we don't want them going, yay, I'm only paying 3% for everything. We want to make sure we're very transparent on how the process works. The seller does have a choice though, right? They can amend the commission, they can counter it, they can accept it, or they can reject it, depending on the hotness of the property, I guess, right? And terms and conditions and all of that.
You have to
Did you
do all
ask
that.
Peter last time? The commission, if we dealing with the seller who is like some investors, right? Or they do something and they say, I will just give you 3%, you do whatever you want with the commission.
Yeah,
Can we give that to the buyer agent?
you could, you
Do
could,
we
but
need to
but you
write
have to
something?
understand, yeah, that you have to, you have to let if you have that kind of arrangement, you
Yeah.
better have some kind of, writing to reflect your intention. Okay?
So
Because,
what
because
form-
the original RPA, the percentage that you put in there is for the listing agent only. But if the seller wants to have that, percentage to cover,
The
the
buyer's
buyer's,
agent.
the commission.
Yeah.
Then you have to clarify that. You have to.
Which
make it
form that we
transparent.
need to put that? Is
It's
just
right there.
put the addendum on the listing agreement?
See attached compensation schedule.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but you have to have it worded like he
Yeah, you have to
said,
have the-
properly.
Properly worded, so that's why,
We
if
need
you
to
want to do a
specify in
different.
the beginning, like,
Yeah,
in
you
the
have to
listing that
specify in the beginning.
if we find, okay, since seller give 3%, I promise to give 1% to buyer's agent.
Yes, you can do that.
We have to
You
put in the beginning,
in
right?
the beginning.
Cannot be.
Oh.
later on.
Wait, Doug's saying they can't hear anything that's going on. Okay, so what they're talking about is, if you're working with an investor and they say, okay, I'll list with you, but you get 3%, you do what you want with it. Is that okay? And Peter said, if you have to click the box that says see attached compensation schedule, have it properly written what you're gonna do with that commission.
Yeah.
Again, this form says seller side only, but you can negotiate later. Yeah, and I don't, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like you are, accounting background, I
We just
stay
want
very
to be
straight.
Simple as possible, in order to, avoid any confusion later, you know,
So
so.
we
if
use
you-
that form to state on the salary, the compensation that you attach, that you
Yeah,
checked just
yeah.
now?
Yes.
Because that says only seller side of transaction.
That's, if you're
Yeah, oh.
commercial, you buy the AIR suite,
No,
Right.
Let's talk with the CAR, not AIR. We'll talk with the CAR here. How can we legally do that?
You can legally do that as long as it is transparent, and as long as it is written clearly.
In
Everybody
which
knows.
form?
This one, you have to attach, the
an
additional
addendum,
addendum, yeah.
yeah.
Because that one says seller side only. But we
Yeah,
pay
they
the buyer
normally it's for
agent.
seller side only, but if you attach another addendum, you can explain that it's not for the seller.
Oh, we
side.
don't, you
It
just
can- Yeah,
specify.
you just
Okay.
specify,
Okay.
that's why you have to use the right language.
But Peter recommends, so they're saying if you attach an addendum saying, your percentage, that's it, you do whatever you want, however you're gonna distribute or not distribute. But the thing is, you need to have a legally drafted addendum
Yeah.
reviewed by a lawyer to make sure that the language is okay and protects the brokerage and you.
Yeah.
Cause the form, the spirit of the form is for the listing side only.
And if you get sued, don't go to Peter, go to the lawyer that advised you.
Right.
So every time we write addendum, we have to go to the lawyer.
Yes.
On this,
Yeah.
because Peter's advising you to use the form the way it says. Peter is advising that. If you decide to do something different, you need to get it written. We are advising as a brokerage that you use the form of the way it's intended. That is our advice and that's what we're directing, correct, Peter?
Correct.
Because otherwise people are gonna be all over the place and the spirit of this is to use the form as it's directed. If a bonus comes up during escrow or because you offered so great, then you can, document that, but the spirit of this form is your side only. So the
Okay.
3% you're talking about that the investor gave you is really for the listing company only, the listing brokerage.
No, but the seller already stated that I'm not gonna accept any other thing. You just
Okay.
split it with the buyer.
Well, that's up
However
to you as a
decide.
business, but you need to have it documented by a lawyer, like he said.
You know,
Yeah,
Michelle, this
because
is
we
money.
want to follow the spirit of the form.
And you're circumventing.
Yes.
The whole purpose of why they did it.
Of why this. And, like we were talking, the DOJ is involved in this, Department of Justice, so we just want to do things right, and that's
Yeah.
why we've had, 7, 8 trainings, to try to iron this out with everybody.
Yeah, I had a long discussion with one of the agents, same thing as you, he said, well, it's open for negotiation, I can do whatever I want, yeah, you could, you don't know how.
Go to a lawyer, yeah,
You know, if you know how to do it legally, be my guest, but chances are most of the agents, they don't.
Peter said that if you decide to do that, again, he's saying you need to have it appropriately documented and he wants you to talk to an attorney to document it right, because the purpose of this form is the seller's side only. Any other questions out there?
This is Buddy. I got a question regarding the compensation.
Okay,
You mentioned that in case we use the other schedule, that it has to be legally prepared. So that
yes,
means that we have to pay a lawyer to prepare that.
If you know how to do it, you're confident that you can, it's clear and legal, yeah, you don't have to have a lawyer. No law compel you to have a lawyer to draft any agreement, but if you don't know how, that's.
Seems like.
Okay.
You know,
Consult a lawyer.
you have the hotline too. We all have access to the hotline. You can ask the lawyers there too, their opinion, right?
Right.
Go ahead.
I was always told that if you make any modifications to the CAR form.
Yeah, you're not covered.
You are practicing law.
Correct.
Yeah, and they won't cover you for the liability.
Yeah, and they don't cover, yeah.
Okay, so,
Yeah, so if you amend these forms,
see, the beauty of using the car form as it's written is because you know, and if something goes wrong, the car is standing behind you and, you're in good ground, but if you do on your own, it avoid the warranty of the form given by the CAR, so, you know, use it as your own peril.
so are there any questions out there? So I wanted to talk about how we'll proceed on Fridays now. So yesterday in the open forum, people want to go through one package at a time. So we'll go back to regular training. We'll do a listing agreement and RPA. We'll do all the disclosures. We'll explain them. So we'll just start going back to regular training. And of course, we'll answer questions on these at any time. You can call the office. You can, we're all here for you. So just make sure if you feel stuck, I know Peter's here on Saturdays. I'm available. Just call. You know, if you feel stuck, we'll be here to listen and help you. And Doug's available. I know he answers on the weekends. So, you know, if there's an emergency, if it's an emergency. So are there any questions out there?
Michelle, I have a question,
Okay.
and this is, might happen. I take a listing and a buyer, because there's gonna be smart buyers out there trying to be smart. I'm not obligated to give out any buyer my listing, personal information, phone number, right? They're gonna try to deal directly with the seller. I take a listing. Is anybody, if a buyer calls me, the listing agent, am I obligated to give them the phone number?
Of the seller?
No.
No,
Okay.
no, he said
Good.
the phone number to the seller. No, we don't give that out as a
I'll-
listing
I'll tell you
agent
Why I asked.
because that's,
Michelle.
you know, confidential,
Why
I would think.
asked Because, we have these the sisters that wanna, they said, Carlos in Palm Springs, if you ever have a condo, let us know, we wanna buy. So I did, I called them up right away, I sent them the MLS, I text them the MLS information. And she says, can we view it online? I said, well, this is all I have. And that's it. I'm just saying that, wow, they were fast. They got around even me. And I don't know what they were talking about. They saw more pictures and stuff.
Yeah, and that brings up a point, Peter. If the listing agent only wants to work with the seller and they've, you know, discussed this, we've done this from time to time on certain properties where we're not gonna, you know, go get your buyer's agent. You can say very politely, you know, you can bring your agent, you know, get your agent and make an offer. We'll be happy to present it.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to just work with the seller and you don't want to go dual, that's up to you
Yeah.
as well.
Michelle,
Yes.
hi, this is Sylvia. I have a question for you. So, on the listing, if I'm the listing agent, and I can put the percentage there, let's say 3%. And I have a buyer. I mean, not my buyer, but I have an agent calling for the buyer. So if my listing says 3% and the buyer agent is blind as to what percentage they could get, at that time, if they submit the request for the seller to pay the buyer's agent commission, can they do it at that time? Or
Yes.
if we have a listing and it only shows 3%, can if when the seller receives it and they say, well, I already told you I'm only paying 3%. Why are they sending this letter, this contract saying that they want me to pay for this? So at that time, I could just say, well, no, they're just asking if you would want to pay this percent for the buyer's agent there, because they're saying they don't have funds for, the buyer doesn't have funds to pay the buyer's agent their commission. Can that be done? How do we approach it?
Yeah, tentatively, you can say I have a verbal, promise to pay so many percent, but you always say to the buyer's brokers that this is negotiable. It depends on the offer later, and but most likely the seller will pay part of the buyer's commission. That's all you have to say. Yeah,
Okay.
it's right. It's a good idea to make it clear to the seller
Right. Yeah.
that the seller is right now is only obligated to pay the listing agent. And as for the buyer's agent, it can be negotiated later when an offer comes in.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Peter, can we, let's say we are a listing agent and we already told by the listing, the seller that they only like say, he agree only, I can only pay you 3%, right?
Mhm.
And then a buyer came and then they asked us, can you represent us? Can we tell them first, like, will you be able to pay my commission? And then if, let's say,
You
they
have to,
say,
you have,
and they say, no, I cannot pay your commission as a representing as a buyer. So, and then we refuse them. So is that considered discrimination?
no, but you have to make sure to the buyer that if you are representing them.
No, we haven't represent, but they asked us like, can you represent us to the seller?
Yes.
Let's say the buyer came to us.
So
as
you
the listing
represent the buyer as well. There will be dual agency, but then it won't be the same thing as a buyer's broker representing the buyer.
Yeah,
You have to have a PRBC to begin with.
no, what I'm saying is, can we refuse them? But let's say the buyer came to us and asked, can you represent us? And then we say, yes, we can.
Yeah,
But then we have to ask them, right? Hey, we're gonna have to give you PRPC this, it's gonna state the compensation. And then they said, no, we cannot pay your commission. So can we by then said like, oh, then I cannot represent. you.
right. You
Can we do that?
Yeah, of course,
It's okay?
of course,
Okay.
yes. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure we don't consider discrimination because of that.
You don't want to go work for free, right? You have to make it clear in the beginning that the buyer has to pay the commission unless you get the seller to pay it for the buyer. Understand?
Yeah,
Yeah.
So,
but the seller already said they're not gonna pay, so we
Well,
already know.
then you have to make sure to them that the seller is not gonna pay, so the buyer has to pay. One way or another,
So we can tell the buyer, hey, if you can pay me, I can represent. you.
Yeah,
If I can, you don't pay me, then do it
Right.
your way,
definitely.
right?
Yeah.
the one thing in the training though, that they said was however you're treating one, treat all.
Mhm.
So don't be mixing and matching how you're responding. However you treat one, you treat all, in the same situation. Yeah, yeah.
So I have a question.
Uh-huh.
In this case, where the buyer cannot pay the listing agent a commission, isn't it our obligation to let but they tell us, oh, I'm gonna offer full price, isn't it our obligation to tell the seller?
You're the listing agent and she's saying, okay, sorry, Sil, see you can't hear. So that she's asking if you know that there's a buyer that wanted you to represent them, but they can't pay you. And you know that the seller's tapped out on what the commission they're gonna pay, it's already on your agreement. Don't you have an obligation to the seller to tell them this buyer is interested in presenting an offer that would be, favorable? I think you should
Yeah,
tell
you
them.
have the
I think
obligation.
you need to talk to your seller and say this particular buyer does not have the funds. And let them know and see what the response is.
Right. Exactly.
me see.
This is Val. I have a question.
Okay,
Let's say the way you talked a while ago about this buyer and the seller commission, or the buyer cannot pay. Okay, if seller wants to sell or buyer wants to buy, if buyer don't have money for commission, can the seller give a counter offer, increase the price, and say, I'll pay you 2.5, but I want you to pay instead of 520, you pay 530 or 540.
oh, you mean increase the purchase price
Yeah,
and
for counter
accept
with
the
purchase price
commission?
instead of countering with the,
Yeah, that can-
with
Yeah,
the,
but you know, if you have a listing
Big-
in the beginning, and that's, you know, and then you suddenly change the price, it's kind of, odd, you know?
Yeah,
But the thing's okay.
will be
So,
funny.
it's
Yeah.
okay.
Makes sense.
it's,
Yeah,
a
as
he's,
long as there's no, you didn't accept the offer before.
But if the price is not
Yeah,
accepted,
it should be okay.
Yeah.
he said
but
it's okay as the seller
it
accepts.
looks funny, though, that's all, you know, because you have a list, you know, your listing price, and then, you jack up the,
but many property go sell above listing price. So if this is not fixed or
Yeah.
offered to somebody else, how is it offer? I mean, offer is not accepted, but
because
it's
of
still
what
a
they offer you,
negotiation.
But offer you a higher price than your asking price, that's okay. But, if you have, first of all, you have the, original price, and then because of, the commission, you check up your.
Yeah, I see
Right,
that.
that kind of looks a little.
They're the best to tell
Oh, for
buyer
the
to offer
lender
more.
For the appraiser.
and the appraiser, yeah, okay.
But maybe buyers, then maybe the buyer agent should say, hey, offer higher price and then ask
Yeah,
before it goes to seller, you know, like Pete said.
Buyer, that's fine, you know, because that's the market price, you know, but.
yeah,
Yeah, okay. Or the best to educate the seller and tell him, hey, don't be surprised if I come later with the buyer and ask for 2 more %.
Yeah,
And
so
we
that's why
put
you
3
have to
here, if
educate-
I come later and ask for 2,
Right.
3 more.
see if I can,
That's why you have to educate the seller that the seller has to anticipate giving the buyer, broker some commission.
Yeah.
to
That's
begin
right.
with.
Yeah. That's good, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Sure.
any other questions before we conclude?
Michelle, back to the scenarios, Herman's, something similar. You said, what do you think? What should we do? Like, I called the buyer and I said, I could represent you. And they could have, let's say I don't know if they could afford or not afford to pay. Okay. Can I tell them, I'll write up the offer and ask for the seller to pay the commission without getting into can I afford or not can afford?
Yeah, we can do that.
Yes, yes. I'll ask
Just don't
those.
check the box, that's all.
Yeah, but
Okay.
once you don't check the box, they're on the hook for that commission on that
That's what I
BRBC.
wanna avoid.
Yeah, because okay.
Yeah, that's what I.
That
wanna
is a
avoid.
contract. If the I can't pay you is not checked, you need to let your buyers know this is a contract. If this, we go through escrow and close this deal, you owe the money. You know, so make sure they understand. There's no way to circle around, you know, it's, you know,
No, I don't wanna circle
Yeah.
on anything.
right, but we need to explain it to them.
Yeah,
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 no, I know you're not trying to circle around, but
right.
the best way is the direct way. Hey, this is a contract. You're gonna pay me 2% or 3% of the purchase price when we close.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, cause we,
If you check the box, then you have a way out, you know, in case you.
Yeah.
Want to pay the
What box is
commission,
that?
but-
What box? I'm confused. What box is
That they
that?
can afford.
that they
Yeah,
can't
okay.
pay.
Financial
Yeah,
support.
Yeah. Any other questions out there before we conclude?
I have a comment. So it's not practical to be, let's say, a double-ended deal. Am I right? double-ended.
No, it is.
transaction.
It depends.
It is, I've done.
He asked us if it's practical to double-end a deal. Yeah, you can.
No, it's.
No, it's not unethical.
I've done a lot of them and
It just
my own
happens,
listings, you get all the buyers and you get the best.
Yeah,
one
it's
for-
fine to duel with these new agreements. You're fine. Yeah.
You just have to do your agency, just like you're representing the buyer and also representing the seller.
Yeah, no, it's not,
Okay?
it's ethical.
It's fine.
Just
Then
do
you
your
talk about
good
like
job.
a fiduciary relationship, they're not there then.
It is.
Yeah, it has to be there.
He's saying if you're dueling,
Yeah,
what about the fiduciary?
yeah, right. You don't have to represent both.
Right,
It's
but
Yeah.
up to you, but you could, if you
you could,
choose to.
easy. Just pick the best offer for your seller. It's easy.
Okay, so we're gonna conclude. Thank you very much. Let me see if there's another question before we go. Thank you all so much. It's always a pleasure to be with you all. We'll start on contracts next week. We'll send out an email with the attachments of what we'll be training on. If you have any questions, give us a call. If you get stuck on something, we're always here. Thank you all. Enjoy your
Thank you,
weekend.
Michelle.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.